Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
So, hello. All right, hey, welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Today, we are going to be starting a new series, and we're going to call that series Monetary Moments with Austin and Josh.
Wow. So that means that
there's a lot of moments
week,
with money.
We're going to be putting out a time frame.
Yep.
So today's is the 20s and 30s. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, this is what we're focusing on.
Correct.
And that age group is the only people we ever want listening to.
Correct.
Yes.
Nope, not really. This is probably good things for everyone to hear, and you should probably listen to the whole series to get an idea of just some overall financial planning thoughts to keep in your mind going forward, because if you're in your 20s and 30s now, this is going to be very applicable, but guess what? You're going to be in your 40s or 50s sometime too.
Yep,
and you should probably
to.
listen to those episodes to know what's coming.
Yep.
So yeah, it's going to be a fun series. It's a 4-part series. It's going to go 20s and 30s in this episode, and then upcoming we'll talk about the 40s and 50s. Then we'll talk about the 60s, because a lot happens in your 60s. And then we're going to talk about the north of your 60s, called your 70s plus. So there's it's a 4-part series. And this is only our second series of continuing things we're doing, and we're really excited to be putting it out.
And that's cool, because everybody is some age, so it applies to everybody.
Everybody is some age at some point, and everybody's a lot of ages throughout their life.
Yeah.
So I think we're covering a pretty broad base here. So let's just dive into it. So this episode is focusing on those in their 20s and their 30s.
Yes.
So first up, topic. Let's talk about debt a little bit.
Yeah.
So debt is a very controversial topic.
Yes.
I think generally we probably feel that, especially young people, probably have too much.
Everybody has too much.
Everybody. Yeah.
If you have debt, it's too much.
Exactly. So let's kind of just go into some thoughts about debt in your 20s and 30s.
Yep.
And I'm going to start us off, Josh, by saying pay down the debt you have as my first point here. So what could I mean by that?
Yeah, so 20s, let's start there. 20s, you're probably coming out of college, and if you're an average person in the United States, you'll probably leave college with some form of college debt. And so that's the primary debt that most 20-year-olds have, is that they have some sort of educational debt. And so, pay that debt off when you have it. And there's other ways to do it. We'll get into that in just a minute. And then when you head into your 30s, there's continuation of college debt for a lot of people, and then you may see cars, homes, and maybe some other form of credit card debt as situations in life happen.
Correct.
So we're going to focus in on a couple of those things. But the first one is that student loan. So as I was looking up for this episode, and I was looking at net worth, the average net worth is actually negative for quite a few years in your early to mid-20s and actually into your 30s, because student loan debt is a big chunk of that piece. You don't have a lot of assets, but you have that debt that you have, and it's, in our opinion, a positive debt, in that there's a asset that results from that debt.
Correct.
So my education allows me to get a higher paying job because I went through that, so that debt provides some sort of reimbursement opportunity for it.
Right.
Another version of debt that's probably not as good as credit card debt. Right. I really don't get any benefit from that debt that I incurred.
Correct.
So there's better debt than others. So as we look at that, but in general, 20s to 30s, you're just starting out. You probably have fewer liabilities at that point. So, like you said, focus on paying down that debt while you have some cash flow. So there's ways to do that. We've talked about debt in prior episodes, and so we're not going to go into too much detail, but there's a snowball method where you take your smallest interest payment and you pay that, and you knock that off, or the smallest balance, I should say.
Yes.
Knock that off, and then once that debt's done, you take whatever that payment was and move it to the next one. And then you just snowball your way from the smallest payment amount to the largest.
And that's a really good mental way to do it.
It's shown to be one of the more successful ways of completing
you get your
the whole
wins,
debt payment.
right?
Yep. There's another version called the Avalanche, which you actually take your highest interest payment and focus on that one and pay it down and work your way down. That one gives you the best total return for your efforts, but it's less likely to succeed. Actually, less people are successful in that you have fewer wins early on.
Exactly.
Because you focus on the higher debt.
Yep.
So that's it. But in general, paying down debt, you're right.
Yeah. In general, student loans are probably the highest portion. You mentioned a couple. Maybe you took out a car loan to buy a car. Maybe you have some credit card debt. Maybe some people in their 20s, but definitely in their 30s are buying houses. So you have a mortgage. And think about paying off the debt that has A, higher interest rates first, and B, is on a depreciating or non-existent asset in the form of credit cards. Like you're not really, there's no collateral there. So pay those things off first. Things like mortgages, it's an understandable debt. Usually we say, hey, get a fixed rate mortgage, shorter term the better, and that's a decent kind of debt, but it's not even that. If you could pay it off, of course everyone would want to, but the reality is that most people don't have, $100,000 to $200,000 or more in today's market just sitting around. My other point about this is avoid taking on new debt. So when you get that supposed student loan paid off or whatever, get that car paid off, whatever that may be, exclude the mortgage for now, but other things kind of paid off. This is a great opportunity to use that as a time of stability and not take on another car payment. And hey, if you don't have to, if you have a great job in your field, don't just take on new school for the sake of taking on new school and going into debt for it, because that is going to be stuff you have to pay the piper eventually. So yeah, I would say this is a great time. And once you get to that point, to avoid taking on new debt, and generally we would say avoid credit card debt. I'm saying aside from them using it every month and paying it off every month, but avoid longer-term credit card debt at all costs for everyone.
Avoid
always
paying interest on credit card debt.
That's terrible.
Yes.
So yes, so those are kind of our thoughts on debt. It's definitely a discussion that is evolving for those in their 20s and 30s. The likelihood of any material student loan help coming through seems pretty low. It keeps being talked about, but at this point, it's pretty low. Don't count on getting bailed out. Yeah. You have to put in the work, and that's what you do.
Yeah. And when it comes to student loan debt, we've talked about it in the past, but it's hard to avoid it at this point in time. Education is so expensive, and most careers at this point require a 4-year degree. And so at this point, that is one of those things that it's hard to get out of college with no debt. There's scholarships, there's a lot you can do. You can work through college, but sometimes it's just worth weighing the future benefits of what will my career offer, and if I get debt now, can I pay it off? So
yeah, and we're in an interesting economy right now where everyone is making decent money, and there are a lot of jobs out there. So if there was a time to not feel like you needed a degree to get a job, I mean, you can work at restaurants or sporting goods stores or Lowe's or whatever, and you're easily making $15 an hour, 20 in a lot of cases, and that's dang good money.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. Next up, Josh, emergency fund.
Yes.
I think this is something that is important, and it's not something that should be overlooked, and this is the time of your life in your 20s and 30s to build it so that when you need it, it's there, right?
Yep. So if you're moving into creating your own new life and you're not used to those unforeseen expenses coming up, you may not have prepared for that. So this is a great time to start building that up. You may be used to, being at home and, oh no, this happened. And then you say, hey, mom or dad, I need some help. And they say, okay, we'll help you. When you're out on your own and you say, okay, I got a flat tire, I have a repair, I have something, you kind of need to be prepared for that. So you're
Things happen.
20s and 30s, when you do have, a lot of people, they have yet to maybe get married or have kids yet. You have fewer of those expenses. Now is a good time to build up that emergency fund.
So the natural next question is then, Josh, how much should I have in my emergency fund?
About $1 million.
Wow. That would cover a lot of emergencies.
No emergency. You start off with, whatever you can to get that build up. A lot of people have like $1,000 is what they use as a target, nice round number. But in general, the target is, and we've talked about emergency funds again in the past, 3 to 6 months of living expenses.
Right.
If you're a single person or you're in a high risk career where you could lose your job quickly, 6 months is where you want to lean. If you have multiple incomes in your household or you're in a easy to find replaceable job, you could be closer to the 3 months. You decide where your comfort level is, but 3 to 6 months is the target. But again, you leave in college, what's your target? Just enough to cover those unforeseen expenses.
Yeah.
Can I have enough money in that if I need a new tire or, if I'm renting, You don't have to worry so much about repairs, but the things that if something could go wrong,
Yep.
I take care of it.
Absolutely.
So whatever that number is for you, where you're living, your lifestyle, that make that determination, start there.
And something to think about with that is that 3 to 6 month number is basically use your budget, and you can take out your non-essentials, right? Use your base budget. These are the.
If I had to live for 3 months,
I need
in a
my
tight situation,
mortgage or rent, food and groceries, insurance, yada yada yada, like the basics.
donuts.
Yeah, donuts. That's a non-negotiable. Then multiply that by 3 or 6. You don't need to use what you're actually spending. There's a lot of fluff in there.
Or your gross pay. Don't look at your paycheck. Look
Right.
at your spending.
So go with that, but also think that if you were to need to dip into that, there is a lot of likelihood that that could go further than that, because the chance. So here's what I would do if I, whatever happens, needed to use my emergency fund, lost my job. People like me would think, hey, I have this for a reason, so I can use it when I need it. This is what it's for. But in the meantime of finding that ideal job or whatever, boom, I'm working at Lowe's.
Yeah.
Boom, I'm
Get
working
some
at
income.
McDonald's. You can slow the drain and slowing the
sell some stuff.
Yeah,
Garage sale.
exactly. So that's something to think as another lever you can pull. Don't obviously don't count on it. That's what the emergency fund's for. You can count on it, but try and slow that draw if you can, because that's less you have to rebuild up once you're getting back stable. So we kind of touched on it, but what is an emergency fund used for? Emergencies, right?
Yes.
So that can be the unexpected flat tire, a couple $100 right off the bat. Got to come up with it. Refrigerator breaks. Wow, that happened to me recently. That's not cheap.
Nope.
Yeah, my car, I crashed my car and it's old, and I didn't have collision insurance, so I need a new car.
Yep.
That's a real one. Health bills, from medical procedures and doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Those are all real expenses that aren't necessarily part of your monthly budget. That's exactly what that's there for.
Yeah. And you made a good point. Things that are not normally in a budget,
Yeah.
right? It's an emergency. So if you keep tapping your emergency fund because I ran out of money and I need to buy groceries, that's not quite right.
Yeah, your budget's wrong
Your
then.
budget's wrong. Or your spending needs to be figured out.
Yeah.
Emergency is, oh no, this happened, which doesn't normally happen.
Exactly.
Where do you need it? Where should it be?
Well, there's a lot of options. We've actually talked about this in an account types episode before. What I do, and I think you do the same. Nowadays, there are good options to digitally store this money in like an online only savings account. There's a number of different providers that do that, but you generally get a little bit better interest rate. The provider typically doesn't have locations to be funding, so they can offer a little bit better rate to be competitive. So you just really get fraction. You get better, much better than your normal bank savings account, but you're still earning, less than 1% in today's world. It'll go up as interest rates go up or go down as interest rates go down. That's what I do. It's easily accessible. You can get to it quickly and easy. It's stable and secure and insured. Yep. You can also do things like you can keep it in a savings account. It's totally fine. Just at your bank. Totally fine. I wouldn't necessarily leave a ton of it in a bag under your bed. You could do some of that, but I would say not a great idea for a lot.
If you're going to do that, at least get a safe or something.
Exactly. Another thing is you could open up a taxable investment account, and I would say generally leave it very conservative in what you have that invested. But maybe you could invest it in some sort of interest-bearing or ETF or something like that.
Or people layer CDs.
Yep.
There's anything where you can get a little return is fine as long as the access is there, because that's the key.
Liquidity.
Emergency fund, you
Right.
want to be able to access your money.
Yep.
Along with it, layering it, maybe you have a little bit at your local bank, a little bit online, or a little bit in a brokerage account because there's a delay. It's fine. Just make sure that if something happens, that money I can get to take care of the need. And,
Absolutely.
that's where credit cards come in, is they're that in between. I could use my credit card to fix the emergency and then pay off the credit card with my emergency fund.
Don't let that credit card bill outstanding earn interest.
Right.
Exactly.
But if I know, hey, I got a flat tire, well, I got my emergency fund, but it's 3 days to move it from my online to my checking account, I'll just pay with the credit card, make that move, and then in 3 days I can knock that debt off.
And one more thing to point out when it comes to the emergency fund is it's okay to use it, right?
Yes.
Don't let it stress you out to dip into your emergency fund, because that's what you put it there for.
When it's an emergency.
When it is an emergency. Don't dip into your emergency fund for non-emergencies. For, normal bills or whatever. That's just not what it's for. But when you do have those things, this is precisely what you put it there for, and it should give you peace that you have it there, right? Mm-hmm. So it's okay to use it. Don't feel bad about yourself for these things happening. That's why you prepared. So it's okay to use it for emergencies. But the key there, Josh, is for emergencies, right?
Definitely.
All right, this is kind of what I feel like is going to take a lot of our time and discussion today, but investing in your 20s and 30s.
Yes.
It's very important. This is how you build A, the habits, and B, the base numbers that compound for years and years and years to come. So kind of talk a little bit about investing in your 20s and 30s and how that sets you up for a successful retirement or future in general, or how you think about that as a financial advisor.
Yeah. So again, we're talking to 20 and 30-year-olds. So for them, it's habits, right? I talk about this a lot, is building up those habits. And the biggest thing for someone that age is you have a lot of time to let it grow. And so, what we want to see happen is, hey, let's get in those habits of investing where you can let that money compound. So the big thing is right now is the cost of missing out. Your biggest risk is the cost of missing out on those compounding years. All right. And so I've run some different numbers, and there's all different ways, but if you get an 8% return, and if you put $6,000 in, if you start at age 20, at age 65, you're going to have $2.5 million if you just put $6,000 in a year. And the reason I use 6,000 is that's the Roth contribution amount for like a Roth IRA, an 8% return. But if you just wait till your 30s, you lose out on almost $1.4 million for waiting 10 years. So the cost of waiting matters. Each year you wait, that compounding is less for that dollars that you were going to put in that year.
Yeah. One thing that, like, as a high-level spitball I like to keep on there is, for every dollar that you put away that you don't need to touch for 30 years, it multiplies by 10 on its own if it's invested in the market. That is craziness. And that's why the more dollars you can put away that you don't need to touch for 30 years, that's precisely this period of someone's life, 20s to 30s, the more money you can put away now, the more that money is being multiplied by 10 just for sitting there growing.
Yep.
And that's awesome.
And so talk about that. So there's risk involved. There's a difference between volatility and risk.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of fear surrounding the stock market. And I think a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, they were scarred by 08, 09, right? This is right probably when a lot of them were just starting their jobs. Maybe they just started a retirement account, or their parents were in the market and in the economy at that time, and they're seeing it as well there. And they hear or saw all of these stories of, the equity market fell 50-some%, right? The S&P 500. That's real, and that happened within our lifetimes, and I think it shaped the way a lot of people in this age range invest. But the truth of the matter is that given enough time, historically speaking, now there's no guarantee of future returns, but historically speaking, the U.S. stock market has always rebounded. And what's the statistic? There has never been a 20-year period for the U.S. stock market where you've had a negative return.
Correct.
Never.
Yeah. The actual number, I think, is 17.
Yeah.
But they use those, 10, 15, 20.
Right.
And so there's, that 20-year, if you look at any 20-year period in the history of the stock market, you've never lost money by investing in the stock market over 20 years.
And the stock market does go down.
Yep.
But the reason that you can get a 8, 9, whatever, 7, 8, 9% return over time historically is because you're taking on that risk. And if you're not taking on the risk, if you're not willing to take on the risk, you're not going to get that kind of return. And that's just going to mean that you actually have to put more of your dollars to work by putting more money in out of every paycheck, every month, every whatever, where if you have a higher rate of return because you're taking on more risk, you can put in less and have more money at the end.
Yep. So what most people equate to risk, they're actually just talking about volatility.
Correct.
Talking about the ups and down swings. And so for a 20 and 30-year-old, that's a minimal risk.
Yeah.
The volatility over the lifetime of that investment, again, we're talking retirement savings, 401ks, those type of things. As a 20, 30-year-old, you have that 30-plus year time frame.
Yeah.
And so the volatility risk is minimized. Your risk is on the risk of missing out.
Yes.
On missing out on those years to let it compound.
And actually, volatility in your 20s and 30s is a good thing.
Yes.
If you look at how the stock market has worked over time, and if you periodically invest, like we advise about everyone to be doing, you're putting in money every paycheck into your 401k, you're putting money every month or whatever into your Roth, you're putting money in periodically on set times, and you don't care what the market's doing because you're just putting money away. You are doing what's called dollar cost averaging. So as the market fell 50% in 08, 09, you were buying shares at a 50% discount that would eventually recover. So you're buying things cheap and you're buying more shares.
Yep.
And then as the market gets a little bit more expensive, you buy less shares and you buy less shares, but you're consistently buying shares and you're buying them at every single price. So over time, your returns as an actual investor are actually different than the market because you're buying things when they're cheap, you're buying things when they're expensive, but you're always buying, but you're taking advantage of that volatility. And that is actually the key to long-term wealth growth, right? So you are buying when the market's up, you're buying when the market's down, but you're always buying, and the smoothing of that is the key. So you're not worried about volatility in your 20s. And in fact, if you were to see, or your 30s for that matter, if you were to see that last spring, 30% market drawdown, right? Freaks people out. In your 20s and 30s, if you had any cash laying around and you would have put that to work, what would have happened?
You would have been fine.
You would have been you would have been
fine.
great.
You would have been great.
So historically speaking, volatility is actually an opportunity for those in your 20s and 30s. Now, that does change, and we'll talk about this in future episodes. But as you get a little older, there is some volatility risk, especially as you near that retirement age. But we're going to hit those when we get to those episodes. But the stock market going up and down is not something to be feared in your 20s and 30s.
That's true. And in general, 20 and 30-year-olds, you have the ability to make mistakes and recover from them. Like you said, there's, looking at someone, we'll talk about, the 50s and 60s and 70 plus, there's a different mindset is I can take investment risk because the ability for those investments to have time to play out. And if I do have a time where the markets are down, I have time to recover. And if I'm averaging in, I'm going to not only recover, but I'm going to benefit from those lower prices.
Right.
So, yeah, it's great. So what are some targets that we can have? And again, when you talk about it, everybody's situation is different. So these are just rules of thumb, kind of industry standards. But what are some targets for 20s and 30-year-olds? Yeah,
and we're going to look at this as like a multiplier of your salary so that it's not a dollar amount. Yep. Dollar amounts are going to be different for everyone. Everyone's salary situation is going to be different. But if you look at it in terms of multipliers of your salary, by the time you're 30, so that's halfway through the time period we're talking about today, and that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah. Yep.
You should have, according to many experts, around 1 times your salary.
Yep.
So that'd be a gross salary.
Yep. So if I'm making $50,000, when I turn 30, I should have $50,000 saved in some vehicle for retirement. Yeah. So Roth IRA, traditional IRA, simple IRA, separate IRA, 401k, doesn't matter. Yep. But it's retirement investments 1 times my salary.
Correct.
Okay. So if I'm in my 20s, that's my goal.
That's what you're
target.
working towards.
I'm working towards when I hit 30, 1x my salary.
And if you have more than that, you're ahead of the curve. And if you're a little bit behind that, you just have a little bit of catching up to do, but that's kind of a high level bogey.
Where I'm targeting.
Yep. So let's flash forward. So you're about to turn 40.
Yep. That's close to where I'm at.
Okay. So we're right here. By the time you're about to turn 40, the goal is about 3 times your salary. So you're actually going to be putting away a lot of money in your 30s, but that money that you put in your 20s has also grown a good bit since then. So about 3 times your gross salary in, again, that is this whole suite of retirement accounts. That could be, Roth, traditional IRA, that could be 401k, and that includes your employer contributions that went into there.
Assets.
And that's just retirement assets.
Yep.
So that is kind of where we think you should be from an investing standpoint. And again, these are different, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone, but these are just very high level targets that people can have to realistically hit some goals.
And as we talk through that, and we'll have some targets and checks for you later, but the minimum you should be doing, what is that for investing?
Yeah, we would say the minimum for anyone who has it at their disposal is you should put in enough money into your employer retirement plan to get your company match.
Yep.
Regardless of the status of anything else you're doing. Even before you've paid off your student loans, before you've done any of that stuff, that is the bare minimum.
Yeah.
That's free money. You can't beat free money.
It's leaving some on the table you can't get back. The power of compounding is stronger than that debt payoff, in our opinion. And so, there's situations that, for all these things, that there's exceptions to. But in general, for most people, at least get that company match and then target in on your other goals.
Yeah.
Because that's money you're leaving on the table that could be compounding as well as your investment.
And it's already setting up that habit. It's automatic.
Goes back to
you won't even
habits.
think about it. You won't even see it in your paycheck, and you're building that habit early.
Yep.
So, I think generally speaking, Josh, when it comes to investing in your 20s and 30s, There is way more risk to not do it than to do it.
Yep.
You need to do it. And the thing is, our generation, we do not have the luxury that prior generations did when they're looking at retirement planning and sitting around saying, okay, yeah, I've had a 401k for 20 years, the last half of my career or whatever, but really the bulk of my assets are coming from this pension.
Yep.
I have this pension, and I got the bulk of my retirement assets there. I have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what I need, or I can take annuities, whatever I want to do.
Yep.
We do not, generally speaking, not for everyone, but generally speaking, have that at our disposal. It's become much more advantageous for employers to not offer that. So this is why it takes more effort on our part as individuals and as investors in our 20s and 30s.
Yep.
So next up, Josh, one of your favorite topics in the entire world. And we've had discussions about this on the podcast before, but at a high level, what do life and disability insurance decisions look like in your 20s and 30s?
And if we look at insurance in general, right? So you leave college or leave high school and you're heading into your career, early 20s, right? You're going to start needing to get coverage on things, right? You may be leaving your parents' insurance at some point in your early 20s. So car insurance, those things matter too.
Yep.
Renter's insurance is very important. So there's a lot of insurance that you're going to need to get that maybe someone else had for you for a little bit.
Right.
Renter's insurance is super cheap, covers your stuff inside wherever you're renting. That's important. The other thing is, car insurance.
It's a legal requirement.
You have to have it. We had a whole thing on this in another episode, but you're going to need to get your insurance as well. But let's get outside of those insurances: life insurance, disability insurance. So, statistically speaking, you have a higher chance of being injured and disabled than passing away early. So, disability insurance is a very important piece, and so some companies offer that. If they do, great. It's usually cheaper.
Right.
If not, you can get your own. But disability insurance is very important to have.
And it's affordable.
It is affordable. Yeah. It provides income if you're unable to work. And so that's big. Then life insurance is the other piece. Now, life insurance is only needed as a lump sum to help cover either expenses at end of life or to provide for someone relying on you. If you're a single person on your own, life insurance isn't as important as disability insurance, because disability insurance says, "Hey, I'm still around and I still have expenses, but I can't work right now."
Right. Yeah. So like a goal for a single person who has no dependents and all that stuff is essentially you just need enough life insurance to cover like funeral expenses and any debts you have.
Yeah. Yep.
That's about it.
Yep. So between the two, most people don't think too much about it. That disability insurance is pretty important.
Right.
Take advantage of what your employers offer, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of times short-term and long-term disability insurance. They may offer life insurance there. They may give it to you as a default, or they may have the ability for you to buy into it. Those are all important. Health insurance. Early 20s, you may be on your parents still, but at some point in time, you're going to need to get your own. Check with your employer again. Do they offer insurance? If not, I got to go on the open exchange market and find my own. Those are important. Don't just think, hey, I'm young and healthy and invulnerable, I'm never going to be sick. Those are expensive costs. And when it goes back to that debt, you do not want to get into debt because you didn't have the insurance.
Yeah, and discuss it. It's good for every young person to discuss with their parents the situation, because oftentimes their kids will just stay on their parents' insurance even though they're offered at work because of whatever. But the reality is that you may be offered a better insurance or a cheaper insurance through your employer, and then you could save your parents money, and I'm sure they would be happy about that. And so it's good to be open and honest about these discussions. And I think that this is an opportunity to have just very clear, candid conversations with your parents as you're a young person going through all of this.
Yep. But consider those essentials. So if I'm looking at my budget, those are things, they're not discretionary. I need to have insurance. They have to be part of my fixed expenses in my budget.
Those are the things you have covered in your emergency fund for months and months or whatever, right? Yeah. Right. They're an essential that's built into the non-negotiable budget. All right, next up, this is the part that people may not think about in their 20s and 30s, but are actually pretty important and actually pretty simple. Yeah. So let's talk about estate planning and kind of how that is. It's going to tie into a little bit with taxes as well. Yep. So Josh, as far as estate planning goes, what do people in their 20s and 30s really need to consider?
Yeah. So estate planning is just saying, okay, if something were to happen to me, what do I want to happen to all the things I've accumulated? My retirement assets, my physical assets, all that. So estate planning is just really setting those documents in place. So for a young person in their 20s or 30s, probably a will is really all they need. There's a lot of
Yeah.
additional estate planning you can get into, but usually that's later down the road. We'll talk about it in the future episodes. But for a 20 or 30-year-old, a will just directs the executor, whoever's in charge of your estate, what you want, what your wishes are. The nice thing about a will is it helps bypass probate for a lot of things. If you title things correctly and have everything done, is you can get things to go around the court system, which is just slow, tedious, and can be expensive. So a will should just say, here's my stuff, here's what I want to happen to it, and you make sure that, when possible, you title those correctly. So, for instance, a 401k. The 401k needs to have a beneficiary. If you're in your 20s or 30s and you are single, you need to choose somebody, because if not, it's going to go through the probate system and they're going to pick for you.
And you can't
want to pick.
You can't pick your dog.
Yes, it has to be a person. And so those are the things that are important for estate planning. That's the things where it's just, wills are not, you're talking about end of life. A lot of people push that off, but it's very important to have, because you're going to put a lot of burden on whoever gets put in charge of that if you're not clear on your wishes.
Well, and you know what else happens in your 20s and 30s? A lot of people get married and start
true.
families.
Yes.
As we both did.
Yes.
So as you're in that phase of life, which is very much in the 20s to 39 range
Yes.
or whatever, it is very important to have wills, because that will determine what would happen to your family should you pass away, yes, but also what would happen should you both pass away to your kids.
Yes. Who's
So
gonna be in charge of them?
Yeah,
Who's
your
gonna raise
guardianship
them?
or
Yep.
whatever for all of that. So that is actually something that is even more important as a parent to think about. Yes. So it's not something to skip. It's just not a box to skip.
No, don't. And it's relatively easy.
It's not
that expensive.
Yeah.
And, should just take a day or two of thoughts and going and meeting with an attorney.
Yeah.
Sit down. If there is a family, sit down together and talk through your wishes, make sure you're on the same page, and then go in and have an attorney draft the will. It's not too hard a process.
Yep. All right.
Taxes. Yes.
Dallas, Texas.
Everybody loves taxes. So in your 20s and 30s, you're probably in the lower income of your working career, right? You start off and are working through. So the best things to do are find ways to take advantage of the lower tax brackets while you're in it.
Yes.
So that comes back to that Roth IRA we've talked about.
Post-tax dollars.
Yes. So get that match in your 401k. If they offer a Roth option, go ahead. That's, again, you're putting money in after tax. You're going to pay the tax on that at a lower tax bracket than you probably will be throughout the rest of your working career. Taxes are also important in that as you look through, maybe if you have an inheritance, anything like that in your 20s and 30s, taxes are great when you're realizing gains. If there's not a step up and you have this high cost basis, that's probably a good time, because you may pay 0 to 15% tax instead of a higher one.
Yep.
So be aware of taxes, but in general, you're probably in a lower tax bracket than you'll experience during your working career.
Yeah.
So utilize that.
And as you get through a year or two of tax returns, if you're finding yourself owing money for taxes, you should probably adjust your withholdings to withhold a little bit more. If you find yourself getting gigantic refunds, you should probably be withholding less.
Yep.
Just ideally, we would tell everyone, in a perfect world, you're not loaning
Zero.
the government. Yeah, you're not loaning the government money for free, and you don't have to owe. So it would be zero. But you should just aim on the side of a teeny refund every year and adjust your withholdings accordingly.
Yep. And, a lot of people say, well, I like getting that big refund check, which is fine. It's a forced way of saving, in a sense, as long as you don't blow it all when you get it. But that's a way of putting money aside. But you're getting zero interest. You just get the same amount of money withheld back. So, it's just, like you said, target trying to break even on that. Now, if you own your own business or have some sort of supplemental income, self-employment, it's a little harder to do that because you probably have ups and downs. So you have to caution on the side. You don't want to pay extra for penalties to the government. So, do estimated taxes and all that fun stuff. But in general, like you said, do your best to minimize taxes.
Yes.
Everybody likes to do that.
Of course.
All right. What do you got for me? Dad joke of the week.
It's more of a dad thought of the week.
Okay.
So, Josh, yesterday, I spotted an albino Dalmatian.
Albino Dalmatian. Okay.
It was the least I could do for him.
Because you spotted it. I like it.
Speaking of that, apparently Cruella is
new
this awesome
series.
movie.
Yeah.
New movie on
It's on
Disney
Disney Plus.
live action. People are freaking
They like
out
it?
because it's dark.
Oh, is it really?
Freaking out because it's dark. I'm like, what did you expect? Her name is Cruella. cruel.
And if you saw the cartoon,
And the cartoon,
she's crazy.
she like skins puppies, right, or something
She
like
wants to
that.
make a coat out of them.
So come on, people, stop freaking out that the movie Cruella is dark. I think it's hilarious. All right, so we got some lists for you here.
Okay.
These are
Summarizing
what we've talked about. So we're going to leave you with some things to do, 5 things to do, 5 things not to do, and a couple bonus tips, okay?
All right.
So Josh, what is the first of 5 things to do?
We're going to kind of work backwards, but this is very important. Have a will.
Have a will.
Have a will.
Simple, easy,
Yep.
not too expensive.
Yep. Now, if you're mailing to someone named Will, that's not what we're talking about. Say, I have a will. He's sitting right next to me.
Exactly.
That's not it.
That doesn't count.
No. Have a will
Estate
from an estate
document.
planning
Yeah.
document. Yes.
Number 2, get your employer match for your retirement plan. Non-negotiable.
Get it.
You got to
Free
do
money.
it.
100% return.
Free money.
Number 3, create and fund emergency fund.
It's a great thing to do.
Yes. So, again, that's there for emergencies. Make sure you have one.
Mm-hmm.
So, to do that, you have to create one and fund it.
Yes. Number 4, really look at all of your insurance needs. But that includes life and disability insurance. So look at your situation, make sure that you are insured as required.
Yes. And last but not least, number 5, pay off student loans.
It's definitely not least.
It's not least, but it is very important. But it also, on the list of things, an emergency fund is very important. A will is extremely important. Paying off your student debts is important.
Yes.
But you need to get those. That's why it's number 5 on our list. You need to do that. But first, have a will. Have an emergency fund.
Get
all
your
those
match.
things. Get your match. Do all that. But student loans are a burden. They're no fun. Pay those off as soon as you can.
Pay them off as soon as you can. Pay off all debt as soon as you can. 5 things not to do. Let's flip the page here. Number 1, do not buy more house than you need in your 20s because rates are low right now, regardless
Get
of
a
if
big
them
house.
spiking. You can get a lot of house, maybe you're qualified for a lot of house anyway. Don't feel like you have to use up your entire allotted approval or whatever, because you could become what's called house poor, where you technically on paper can fund with cash flow your house your payments, but you will
do
not
anything
be able to
else.
go on vacation or pay for, you're going to be living on ramen. Don't buy more house than you need, because that can also set you up for a drag in, even though you're going to be making more money in the future, it can be a bit of your drag on your lifestyle.
Yeah. And along with that, don't feel like you have to buy a house. Renting has
okay.
its advantages.
It sure does.
Depending on your life situation. So, very good. Number 2, don't take on car loans. Car loans are one of those debts that are tied to a depreciating asset.
Wrong way.
The car gets less valuable over time, and your debt stays along with that depreciating
Correct.
asset. So, do not get car loans when you can avoid it.
Number 3, kind of in the same bucket, don't carry credit card debt. So we've had an episode where we've talked about the ways that we use credit cards, and we think they can be a very good tool. But we also say that every single month, pay that statement balance so you don't pay a dime in interest. And then you're just kind of using it to your advantage,
Yes.
which is a great tool, and we like it. But the second that you don't pay that full amount and you're carrying balances over, you're earning interest, or you're not earning interest, you're accruing and having to pay interest. That's the wrong way. And there's the reason that those interest rates are so high is because they don't go back on the things you've purchased, the food you purchased, the vacation you took. They can't take that from you.
Nope.
That's why you're getting charged exorbitant amounts of
they wanna
interest.
collect
So
on that risk.
do not ever carry credit card debt, because if you have to put a big purchase on there, you should be funding that with some money you've already set aside, whether that be from an emergency or from a short-term savings that you just were saving up for a new whatever and you put it on the credit card. You should always be funding that with actual cash.
Yes. Number 4, do not touch your retirement savings.
Do not.
Retirement savings are for?
In only.
Yes.
Putting money in.
Yes.
And for retirement.
They're for retirement.
Yeah, don't take money out
Yep.
until you're in retirement.
Yep. And so that's you have a goal.
Yes.
It's for a purpose. But while you're in your 20s and 30s,
Don't touch
most people are not retiring.
No.
So unless you retire in your 20s or 30s,
Even
you can have
then,
it.
you're going to have taxes and penalties.
So avoid it. But don't touch it. All right. Just think of that money as future money not available to you. So again, when we talked about those goals, 1x at 30 and then 3x at 40, that money that sits there, I mean, if you're 3x your salary, if you, let's say you make $50,000, that's $150,000 of retirement assets. That's a good chunk of money.
Right.
Don't touch.
Don't touch it.
That's right. You may say, well, I can use some of that for my down payment on a house. No. It's not for that goal. It's for a different goal.
Exactly. And number 5, this is something that we are passionate about, but we don't think that just because you're in your 20s and your 30s doesn't mean that this is necessarily intuitive for everyone. So we don't think you should try to do it alone. So Josh, give us a couple minutes on that.
Yeah, so in your 20s and 30s, it's great to have some sort of financial advisor there helping guide you. Now, depending on where you're at in the area, some financial advisors may have a minimum, and it may be hard as a 20 or 30-year-old to fit into there. But some employers offer that as part of the retirement service, is that you can talk to an investment professional. There's also great advisors out there who have no minimum or do just one-off financial planning. So find someone that can help you at least set up the goals and get you heading in the right direction. And just for fun, we got a couple bonus tips for you.
Ooh, bonus tips.
So the first one I have is develop a marketable skill and then build on it, right? You, in your 20s, you're starting out in a career. Chances are your entry-level job may not be your ideal job for the rest of your life. But you can definitely learn skills and develop it from there. You may get into an entry-level position and be able to watch, observe, and maybe even train under a spot where you eventually want to be.
Right.
So in your 20s and 30s is a great time to try out different things, find what you like, but build on those talents and skills that you have.
Number 2, build up a credit history. So credit is something that is very important when it comes to taking on more debt, essentially, because the better your credit history, the better your credit score, all of these things, the better terms that you will have when you want to take out a loan. And what we would say, specifically speaking, as it comes to buying and refinancing your home, that's going to be the kind that we would say, yeah, that's why we want people to have good credit. Well, how you do that is through responsible uses of credit prior to that.
Yes.
Right? So things that matter, having credit lines open for a long time. So we would say it's smart for someone maybe later in college or whatever to open up a credit card and put something simple on.
Yep.
Put your gas on it, only your gas, and pay it off every single month.
Yep.
But that starts that credit history. Also, never miss a payment. Always pay things on time, pay things in full. That is how you're going to have good credit. Avoid opening too many accounts. It's good to have some. Avoid closing accounts because that takes your length of time down. But this is a good time in your life to build up credit history because, maybe you're renting throughout your 20s and you want to buy that house when you're in your 30s. And if you were unwise with your credit in your 20s, that's going to really limit your options in your 30s when you go to buy that house. So credit history, build it up, keep it good. That's what I would say.
And then finally, and this is just more of a personal tip, is clean up your online presence.
Yeah, you've really had to do that lately.
Yeah, if you look backwards on your life and say, you know what, I made some decisions that weren't quite so smart, or I just posted some things on there that just maybe when I'm out there in the professional world just don't look very well on me.
Yeah.
Clean that up. Yeah. Especially, and I'm looking, 20-year-olds as you're heading out into the people will do a background check on you in a sense of they'll look for you and try to find you on social media.
Right.
And, if you have a bunch of college pictures that you thought, oh, these are great, they're hilarious.
Probably
Maybe they are.
Yeah.
But
probably not good for you.
Look at it from an employer's eyes. But in general, that's a great thing. 20s and 30s, as you're heading to be a more professional career, those are the things you just want to think about that not, especially in today's day and age, there's a lot of information on you out there. Just be aware of it and be cognizant of what
think about
story it tells.
That one tweet that you sent in college that was inappropriate in some way, shape, or form could really turn around to bite you on the butt. It can cost you a job if you're interviewing for it, or even one while you're in it. Yeah. So that's just the way the world is today. So keep a close eye on that. I would say this is a great opportunity to thin out your social media reach. It's real. I think everyone would be healthier if we spent less time on social media anyway. So, as always, check out our free gift to you. It's a brief list of 8 principles of timeless investing. These are overarching investment themes meant to keep you on track to meet your long-term goals. We talk about a lot of the things that we talked about today in that. Check it out. It's a free PDF on our website. So, Josh, how can people help us grow this podcast?
Yeah, first of all, make sure you subscribe. That way, every Thursday, you get our newest episode. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us be found by more and more people. If you have any thoughts or questions, or maybe you're in your 20s and 30s and you want some more clarification, shoot us an email at hello@theinvesteddads.com, and we'd love to hear from you and answer your questions. And if you know somebody in their 20s or 30s, please share this episode with them and help them out to get them on a good path for financial success.
The next episode of this series, Monetary Moments, will be around your 40s and 50s. So stay tuned for that. Until next week, have a great week.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.